As bike packers, we're always looking for ways to take the edge off, right? Seeking more comfort, more reliability, and well, a setup that just works even when you don't or the weather doesn't cooperate. So over the past several years, Viral Bikes has been working to deliver exactly that. And with this here Wanderer, they look to continue that trend. But is the Wanderer built to wander? Let's find out. All right, so if you missed my review of the Viral Derive from a few years back, well, I've linked that in the description below. But that was my first Pinion-based equipped bike that I tested. And well, I really came away pretty impressed with the overall system. So Viral started by Steve Domahidi. Some of you might remember him from his time co-founding Niner Bikes nearly 2 decades ago. But he's been in the bike industry in some way, shape, or form for over 35 years. And while his passion for bikes has really yet to slow down, he's been consulting, designing, and even making children's books about bikes. You got it. And of course, he continues to push the limits of what a Pinion-equipped bike can do with Viral Bikes. So Viral Bikes launched somewhere around 2016 and went through a few iterations of, say, hardtails before narrowing things down. Today, they offer just 2 bikes, the Derive and the Wanderer, as you see here. This actually launched just a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago. So while the frames are made overseas, Viral's headquarters are now based in Bentonville, Arkansas, where bikes are assembled and shipped out. And while the Wanderer is Steve's first drop bar bike under the Viral name, he's certainly no stranger to this style of bike. Over the years, he's helped design drop bar bikes for Factor bikes and Argonaut cycles, but we might say this is maybe his first kind of adventure forward drop bar bike. And well, it offers some really neat characteristics. But before we do dive into those characteristics, I do want to mention that this video is supported in part by Tailfin. Tailfin designs and engineers technical bikepacking equipment for almost any kind of adventure. Innovation and quality are at the heart of what makes them tick, and their constant strive to create better performing gear means that you can just focus on enjoying the ride. They offer a full range of options for hauling your gear, whether you're taking on a big race or simply escaping for an overnighter. So to learn a little bit more about Tailfin and their offerings, you can click on the card in the top right corner here, or also find the link in the description below. All right, so let's dive into why Pinion, this gearbox down here, makes sense for an adventure-focused bike. So I actually did a full video on this topic, which is linked in the description below, but here's kind of the short version. So Pinion was founded in 2006 by Christoph Lehrman and Michael Schmitz, 2 former Porsche engineers who also happen to really love mountain biking. So they set out to design a drivetrain that shifts as intuitively, precisely, and as wear-free as the manual transmission. So to rethink how bikes shift, they created a sealed gearbox and centered it on the bike, keeping basically the weight between the wheels, unlike kind of the roll-off that kind of sits at the back and kind of creates a heavy rear end. So the layout changed everything. Pinion bikes aren't just derailleur-free, they're built around the gearbox. So there's no traditional bottom bracket shell, crankset, or drivetrain. Instead, the gearbox right down here bolts directly to the frame as one integrated system. Yes, the Pinion system adds a bit of weight and requires a Pinion-specific frame, but the trade-off is almost zero maintenance. Pinion says you only actually need to change the oil every 6,213 miles or 10,000 kilometers versus changing out, say, worn parts and cleaning chains. Yeah, it's kind of a nice perk. Now, Steve told me he wasn't all that eager to actually design a drop bar bike at first, mainly because the shifting. Pinion grip shifters used on flat bar bikes don't really translate well to drop bar bikes. But once Pinion actually launched the Smart Shift with electronic shifting and the ability to shift under load, well, things started to kind of change. And when TRP came out with the high wire system, it finally gave Steve a real solution for integrating Pinion into a proper drop bar setup. So the Wanderer was born. All right, so naturally, the Wander is a fitting name for Viral's latest offering, built for long days, weeks, or well, even months in the saddle. So it's obviously centered around the Pinion gearbox, but it also includes a lot of really unique, thoughtful bike packing provisions that we will get into here soon. But first, it's worth mentioning that it is made out of titanium. So Viral uses triple butted titanium for all of their frames. And on the Wanderer, they actually have a very unique kind of spring plate, titanium spring plate in the back here. So the design allows the rear end to actually flex about 7 to 12 millimeters. It's super subtle, but you certainly can feel it take the edge off. I'd say especially on chattery surfaces. I'd imagine it works a little bit better for even heavier riders. I'm not that heavy, so it doesn't flex as much. So while the flex is certainly nice to have, I think the real benefit here is the damping of energy through the entire seat tube. That added damping translates to noticeably more comfort, something I definitely could feel while seated. The Wanderer also features the Gates carbon belt drive, also 5 sets of cage mounts in and around the triangle, including 2 3-pack mounts and a few bonus bosses near the front of the triangle up here, and then obviously top tube mounts. So there are also rear rack mounts at the alloy dropout and seat stay right here, and internal dynamo cable routing for a rear light. Plus the frame space, well, not gigantic, I'd say is still pretty generous. So yeah, it's definitely aimed at adventure and allows for a bit of creativity to, well, load your gear. All right, intermission to take in a little sound of the river. So the Wanderer has boost spacing and clears up to 2.4-inch tires, which is the same as bikes like, say, the Salsa Cutthroat. That said, it has solid mud clearance. I have 2.25-inch tires on here, and as you can see in this photo or this video, I have some decent muck caked up near the yoke and still has obviously some room to spare here. While you can squeeze a 2.6-inch tire, if you're heading into peanut butter mud territory, you're definitely flirting with trouble, so keep that in mind. All right, so the Wanderer certainly has mountain bike DNA, despite the drop bars. One of the main reasons I say that is, well, it's spec'd with post-mount brakes. I much prefer this style of brake. They're infinitely easier to adjust in the field or at home, but post-mount was a priority from the start here, since Steve actually designed the Wanderer to work with a 100mm fork. In this case, the RockShox Sid SL. And the frame is built around a 506mm axle to crown. So that opens the door to running something like the NV Mountain fork or any carbon fork with similar axle to crown measurements. And in fact, the Sid I'm running here has nearly identical measurements at sag, so they are functionally interchangeable from a geometry standpoint. So I ended up testing the size V4, and while I could have fit a V3, which is certainly, I'd say, a medium, more or less, I'm glad I went with the larger one, especially after Steve recommended sizing up. All right, so as with all of my reviews, you can actually find my body dimensions in the YouTube description, but I'll tell you anyways. I'm 5'9.5" with a 32-inch inseam and a +2 ape index, so my arms are actually longer than my height. So I usually start with the reach measurement on the GeoChart when comparing bikes, and well, drop bar mountain bikes are always a little tricky to size. I loved the medium Lorax that I was on, the Esker Lorax, but the longer reach of the Wanderer didn't actually feel excessive. Sure, there was moments, especially when kind of sprinting fast on flats, where it felt a bit stretched out and kind of slower to get moving, but on rough descents or say twisty single track, the stability was very welcome. So this is one of, say, the longer reaches I've ever tried on a drop bar mountain bike, a drop bar bike in general, coming in at 447mm, with the stack at 641mm. So the bike honestly felt comfortable right away, with the saddle centered on the seat post and a 70mm stem up front. So the wheelbase measures 1,160mm, and the chainstays are 35mm in their shortest position. However, with the belt setup, it landed closer to 440 millimeters, as this system is at the mercy of the belt and belt ring combos. All right, so the head tube angle is 67.5 degrees unsagged and roughly 68 degrees at sag after measuring it. The seat tube angle is 75.5 degrees on the size V4, and it is size specific, meaning the geometry puts the riders in a similar balanced position across all size ranges. And finally, the bottom bracket drop here is 70 millimeters paired with a 170 millimeter crank. The bike felt stable and planted on fast descents and rough terrain, while also offering, I'd say, good height to reduce any pedal strikes. Overall, I felt very balanced on this bike, and I had no real qualms when descending or climbing. All right, so Steve's goal with the Wanderer was to create the most capable bike he could imagine. That's what he said. In his words, some would say the downhill bike is the most capable because, well, they're measuring in terms of getting rowdy. That wasn't my measurement. So my measurement for most capable bike ever was that it be a Swiss Army knife version of a bike and not compromise on anything in the process. Road, gravel, mountain biking, it can do it all, and it can do it all deftly. So did it deliver? Well, honestly, after my first ride, I actually wasn't totally sold, but here's why. So that ride was mellow, flat, slow, and mostly on smooth gravel and pavement. So most bikes handle that kind of terrain just fine. I'd say some feel spunky, others don't. I'd put the Wanderer in the not so spunky category in that circumstance, at least at first. So it wasn't exactly wandering far from home, let's say, okay? But as things started to, I'd say, melt out here in Colorado and Gunnison, I got the chance to kind of test it on more rugged terrain where it clearly felt more in its element. Steep roads, further from home rides, a mix of single track, mud, snow, and loose rock. The more I ventured into the unknown, the more the Wanderer really came alive. So I ended up capping my test period with this bike with an overnighter a few days ago. And well, it wasn't anything epic, but riding this bike loaded, it just felt right. It wanted to be loaded. The weight made it feel very planted on steep climbs and gave me loads of confidence on super fast, chunky descents. We even hit snowline on a north-facing aspect, and honestly, it was kind of the best feeling. Shifting without care while grit and grime was flying everywhere. Yeah, it was pretty nice. And with the Pinion, I knew that, well, I just didn't have to worry about it. I just could keep going. And that is rarely an okay thing to do with the derailleur hanging back there. So by the end of my test period, I was hammering on the flats, a paved flat road, and feeling the same snappy, responsive feel that I love in a bike. And looking back, maybe that sluggish first ride had more to do with the tired winter legs and, well, a freshly tensioned belt drive. And after, I'd say, a couple of months of riding this bike, I feel like it's fully broken in and pedaling the way I like, efficient and snappy. And while I wish I actually had more time on this bike, the final overnighter certainly gave me clarity. The Wanderer is an extremely capable adventure-focused drop bar bike. Maybe the most adventurous that I've tested. It's comfortable, durable, efficient, and yeah, it looks the part too. It's ready for big worldwide rides, adventures on long routes like, say, the Great Divide mountain bike route, or shorter ones like the Sage and Saddles right out of Gunnison here. So if you haven't noticed from a few of the shots already, this is a top of the line bike. Maybe as top of the line as a bike gets. Not just because the Pinion drivetrain alone is super expensive, but because the components on the bike are, well, yeah, they're the top end, high end. So let's start with the Pinion though. This is a 12-speed Pinion smart shift system, which runs around $2,000 on its own. Add in the titanium tube set and other premium parts, and yeah, it's not cheap. But Steve knows that, and well, the idea here is that you get a forever bike. And while I know some of you don't believe in a forever bike, I know many of you also do. So I can see, well, the Wanderer being that timeless bike. Talking about the drivetrain a bit more, the build was made possible thanks to two key things: the Pinion Smart System and the TRP high wire lever. So the last Pinion system I tested on the Surly Moonlander Yeah, it certainly took some effort to shift it, but the TRP setup, it's an electronic shifting setup. It feels surprisingly close to the Shimano GRX Di2 lever. The buttons are super responsive, so much so that all I have to do is actually just press it with my pinky and it shifts. And while it's not as quite as crisp as I'd say a finely tuned derailleur drivetrain, it's a massive improvement over the old cable actuated shifter. Plus, there's way less cockpit clutter. Just, yeah, it's simple. And of course, 600% range, 80% increase over the popular 12-speed drivetrains on the market currently. So you have a drivetrain that will get you up with ease and of course, well, give you that high-end speed when you want it. And yes, I'll admit, occasionally I find myself in between gears, especially at higher speeds and let's say the top end of the range. But just like any drivetrain, a short adjustment period kind of typically resolves that frustration. But one thing I noticed earlier on was I wanted the shift paddles on the right shifter to be reversed. Thankfully, Pinion has this smart shift app that lets you remap the triggers. It also does a few other things like being able to keep tabs on battery life. So the Smart Shift does have a battery pack, and actually Steve sent me the charger, but told me I probably wouldn't actually need it. And well, he was right. So Pinion actually claims up to 100 hours or 20,000 shifts per charge, which, well, is a huge benefit with this system. That said, one of the downsides of the charger itself is if you're planning a big trip over 100 hours, you'll need to bring it with you, and it's kind of bulky and it's proprietary. While Steve did a great job of kind of routing everything over here really nice and neatly, it's still an odd choice for Pinion to go with this high go. I think it's a 6-prong connector just to charge the battery. I would have loved to have seen a simple USB-C or something other than this. As far as the fork is concerned, at first I certainly was not sold on a 100mm suspension fork. I thought it was too much for a drop bar bike. But then, like I was getting into more of that rugged terrain, exploring more, I actually appreciated it. Paired with the Wanderer's capable geometry, it gave the bike the edge on technical trails versus, say, other bikes in its category. Drop bars still don't inspire the same confidence as, say, flat bars do for me, but this is the closest I've felt to a true flat bar hardtail with drops, if that makes any sense. If I was running, say, a rigid fork, I might have opted for that V3 instead, but with the suspension fork and that more central weight and that shorter stem, it certainly felt balanced and controlled. Say if I was to be on the medium, I think my weight would have been a little bit more forward and it wouldn't have felt as inspiring. All right, so another bike, drop bar bike with the dropper post. I mean, it's essential, right? This one has 120 millimeters of travel. And well, yeah, I'm just super glad it was spec'd with the dropper post. Even if I really didn't love the dropper lever placement. The 3D printed Physique and Teres R1 adaptive saddle was surprisingly comfy. And the Ritchie beacon bars, man, I actually love these things. The shallow drops puts you in a more upright position even when you are in the drops, which I really, really appreciated on a bike that had 100 millimeters of suspension. All right, so rounding out the builds are Chris King wheels and hubs. The engagement is fine, though. The gearbox certainly adds a slight delay, but I much prefer these over the Onyx hubs that were on my last viral test bike. Those were, I'd say, a little spongy, had this like weird reboundy feel that I really couldn't get past. Plus, all Chris King rims come with a lifetime warranty, which is nice. And then obviously the Schwalbe Rick XC tires, they rolled fast, hooked up pretty well on firm terrain, less so on slick surfaces, but overall they were solid performers. So, the viral Wanderer. If you asked me to describe, well, the Wanderer in one word, yeah, I'd say adventure. And yeah, I know that might sound a little cheesy, but it truly does fit the bill. Adventure involves, well, a bit of everything. And building a bike that can handle a wide range of terrain and still feel efficient without much daily maintenance, yeah, it's no easy task. This bike isn't built to win the next, say, gravel race, and that's the point. It's built to suit most riders on most terrain with minimal fuss. And I really appreciate that. It's been really fun to actually test a few Pinion bikes now, and I'm really looking forward to maybe trying out a few more, especially ones that might be priced a little bit easier on the wallet. But as a titanium fan, it's hard to complain about, well, this quality here. Paired with the titanium spring plate, Steve certainly designed, well, a really great bike to take the edge off. So combine that with dial geometry, top tier welds, and, well, an overall aesthetic, I'd say the Wanderer is a dream machine. So the Wanderer full build with suspension fork here, this build is $10,195 USD with the current tariff increase, and that price could shift again. The frame alone starts at $6,295 USD, which includes the Pinion gearbox, belt, and belt rings. So the Viral Wanderer, what do you all think? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, thank you all so much for watching. And if you like what you saw in this video and want to see a little bit more like it, you can do so by hitting that subscribe button and notification bell. And if you want to help support everything we're doing on this YouTube channel, everything at BIKEPACKING.com, you can do so by joining the Bikepacking Collective. The Collective offers a lot of awesome perks, including the all-new base camp, industry discounts, monthly giveaways, and the twice yearly bikepacking journal. So to learn a little bit more about the Collective or just to join, you can click on the card in the top right corner here, or also find the link in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, pedal further.